So my name is John Bear Mitchell, and I'm Penobscot, and I've been known to tell stories before. This story is called Katahdin's Children, and it's an old story, and it has a lot of good teachings in it. It was a late summer day, and there was a woman, and she was out picking blueberries, kind of an event that happened at the end of the summer. It was one of the last berry crops to show itself. And she was out gathering berries by herself, and she was just wandering around thinking of all the beauty there was around her. And to the north, she could see the top of Mount Katahdin. It was a beautiful, majestic, strong mountain. But it was also one that was revered, one that wasn't traveled up on. And it was a place where offerings were put. And she thought, if Katahdin was a man, I surely would marry him. You know, she was kind of lonely. She was at the age where she was thinking about marrying someone and having children. And there wasn't a lot of people back home that she felt comfortable with in that regard. But nevertheless, she just kept gathering her berries. And as I said earlier, the days are long. So she stopped for a rest. She found a place that was near a big granite boulder. It was lined with moss. She sat down on it, leaned up against it with her back, and closed her eyes just for a few minutes, she thought. And it wasn't too long. She felt like she didn't sleep very long, but when she woke up, she was in a different place. Well, there was a man standing there, one she didn't recognize. Strong, powerful man. It was actually the spirit of Katahdin. And she said to him, "Where am I?" And he said, "Well, I heard you. I heard you speak." He said, "I'm the spirit of Katahdin. And I heard that you would marry me." He said, "I too am lonely. So I went and I got you and I brought you up here." She was a little confused, but she was happy. So she decided to stay. Well, it wasn't too long into her stay when she could look down in the mountain and she saw her people looking for her. She saw her family, her friends, and people that were just worried for her well-being look for her. They searched up on hills, they searched down in swampy areas, through thick forests. And she noticed they were shedding many tears. They were crying, they were mourning for her, they were sad. They didn't want to lose her, but they could not find her. But they searched endlessly for her until they felt there was no hope. A lot of time had gone by and they were concerned. But they also felt like they were not going to find her if they hadn't found her yet. So she continued living up there for quite some time. And she gave birth to 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl. And they looked like any other kid. They looked like any other children. Only there was one distinct difference, and that was their eyebrows. And their eyebrows were the color and shape of stone, which was the only thing that Katahdin had passed on to his children as far as any indication on who their dad would be. And they also had what we would call magical sort of abilities, but they didn't display them much up there. Katahdin provided them with food and warm shelter and all the love he could possibly give a child. And they loved him. They were a family. But like I said, after a few years, the woman, she got kind of lonely. She got kind of sad. And it wasn't because of her situation. She was really happy where she was. She was really happy with her family and everything that was provided for her. But she was sad because she missed her family back home. She left them. She did it purposefully. And she felt like she hadn't really told them anything or left them with any indication that she was okay and happy. So she asked Katad, and she said, "Can I go back and visit my family? Can I stay with them for a while? And, I don't have to bring the children, but if I could go back and just reacquaint myself to let them know I'm okay, that I'm good, that would make my heart full. And when I come home here, at least they would know that I'm happy and that I'm healthy." And he said, "Yes, that's fine. You're not asking for anything out of the ordinary. You should go back to your family. You should let them know you're okay. In fact, you should bring the children. They'd be happy to know that you have children and that you're happy and healthy and being provided for. I want them to know that. But when you do go back, you cannot tell them who the Father is. You cannot tell them about me. I am of this mountain. Some fear me. Some honor me. There'll be all different kinds of emotions around the knowledge that I can talk to people and that I can interact and be among you. And it's not my wish to be known like that." So she said, "Okay." And she was very happy because she would want to introduce her children to her family. And she hoped everybody was still well and still able to remember her. It's been quite a few years. So he took her back. It was early in the morning, and he dropped her near the village where she was from, and the children as well, and they walked into the village, and he left. And when she reintroduced herself to her family, they were more than happy to see her. They were ecstatic. They were praying. They were thanking God. They were hugging the children. They just were so happy to have her back in their lives and to know that she was okay and that she was well. And although this was a time of a lot of celebration, it was also a time of much pain, because at that point in time, there was a famine. There was no food, or there was very little. The only thing they had was plants. They didn't have any meat. They didn't have any fish or waterfowl. And they couldn't celebrate her reunion with food, which is a normal thing that would happen. But the boy and the girl knew they had these abilities, these what we call magical abilities. And the girl, she could make things happen. She would say something, and then she would pass her hand by her mouth, and whatever she said would come true. And the boy, he was given a warrior ability, almost the ability of lightning. Whenever he pointed at something, it would die, it would perish. This was not necessarily good for both of them. They could use their magical abilities for things that may harm people. But the two siblings talked, and they decided that they could help their family here, the family they just met. They didn't like to see anybody in pain. So the girl said that there was plenty of meat, there was plenty of game, there was plenty of fish and eels and waterfowl. And after she said that, she passed her hand by her mouth. And to everybody's surprise, everywhere, there was moose, there was caribou, there were bear and small game, and there was plenty of fish and waterfowl and other birds. And the people were confused by this. They said, this can't be normal. I mean, these children look like normal children, except for their eyebrows, which they look like they're of stone. But how could this be? This is great news. We have food now. This is happy. We're happy, but we're also very confused by this. And the boy, he said, it's time to gather this meat now. It's time to celebrate and to replenish your bodies with this nutrition. And he pointed to a moose, and the moose fell. Its spirit left, and the meat remained behind, and people were confused about this. I mean, they were really too weak to go hunting. They had to gather some energy to be able to do that, but this boy was pointing at animals, and these animals were giving their bodies to the people, and the spirits were traveling on. And again, people were excited about this. They knew that this was a blessing, and they had to take this blessing. They knew that it was a time that the Creator was giving them an opportunity, and they had to take this opportunity. And so they gathered the meat. And that night they had a celebration that was beyond any of their expectations, even beyond the expectations of Katahdin's children and his wife. But they took it as a blessing. And the children and Gluskab's wife stayed among her family for several months. But then they got lonely for their home. She realized that even though this was her home in her heart and her youth, this wasn't her home now. So she told her families that she was heading back to her husband and to her home, and that occasionally she would come by, and occasionally she would visit and bring the children. The next day, when everybody woke up, she was gone. Katahdin had come back to get her. He heard her request, and he got the children as well and went back home. And to this day, they live there. And to this day, we still have the abundance of the forest for our nutrition, and of the rivers and lakes for our fish, and the skies for our waterfowl. And this is a story of Katahdin and his children.